Hi, I'm Mary Brody, and I'm the author of Revenue or Relationships Win Both. Now, when I do content audits for companies, I frequently come across the same issue again and again: inconsistent communication approaches. Now, you may have content in your corporate libraries or materials that have different degrees of branding, and that's totally fine. And in fact, I'd recommend that you have that, because not all content, interactions, or conversations that a company produces should be heavily branded and messaged. And in fact, companies often incorporate third-party materials to communicate their messages for them, so they balance what they say about themselves with what others say about them. But at the same time, you need to know what being branded means for your company. And content analysis can help you do that. We can use a scoring approach that is similar to the accountability approach to equalize content as much as possible, so we can more easily identify what's working and not working. However, this analysis is different in that here we are analyzing what is being communicated and how that is done, rather than if a company is delivering on its promise. And that is consistent with my favorite way to describe branding. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. Now, great branding doesn't involve only using the right logos and colors, and it accurately communicates who the company is and what it does through its conversations and interactions. And this content analysis approach may be able to help you determine if you're succeeding doing that in your customer conversations. Now, there are 6 parts to this type of analysis. First, visibility, or to start, classify where this piece of content lives in your customer relationship lifecycle and its tier. Number 2, purpose. Classify which type of conversation it is from the 4 categories. 3, author and audience. For the purposes of this analysis, we will assume that it is the company. If the author is someone or something else, you're just going to note that. 4, what you're saying in your conversation or scoring the conversation topics. 5, how you are saying your conversation or scoring the conversation brand. And 6, how do these conversations map to the bottom line? You're going to want to gather the results for all the different types of content for comparison to better understand how they contribute to the conversation. And this entire exercise is going to help you see how your company's conversations are contributing to that bottom line. Now, what do I mean by visibility? Where does your audience find your content in the customer relationship lifecycle? Now, as we know, there are 4 steps: pre-purchase, or the joy of discovery; purchase, or the key transaction step of any journey; the product experience, or where expectations are met; and post-purchase, or where loyalty and community is built. You can learn more about these steps in the associated videos in the course area on conversations. Now, when you determine where your content conversations and interactions occur in this life cycle, you may notice that some content will appear in more than one step, and that's okay. Also note that you will be communicating your brand in a slightly different way in each step, most likely communicating some values more strongly than others along the way, and that's okay too. And in fact, it's necessary. We're going to explore this in one of the other analyses. All we're doing in this analysis is indicating where that content is visible. Now, you may also want to note which tier of the customer relationship lifecycle this conversation appears. Is this a conversation for a first-tier relationship to sell a main product? Or is it a conversation related to a VIP program, or a replacement, or a repair, a resell, or some other type of deeper customer connection? That's also key to understand and note for later analysis. The author and audience. For this part of the analysis, the author will typically be the company or an employee, and the audience can be anyone in a stakeholder group, from partners to customers and prospects and more. The audience could even include members of your supply chain. Your company may have content authors who are not employees, and this could include influencers or hired consultants who complete a study that supports different company initiatives. However, these types of authors and their work do impact the brand. This is why it should be noted who the author is and the target audience. And the author may not always be an employee, but the company, or rather it is the work of an employee or contractor written or spoken as the company, and that's okay too. We just need to record and track it for our analysis so we can more easily compare and contrast content in an apples to apples comparison so we can better understand what is effective, or rather, what does or does not communicate the brand. There are 4 types of conversations. The first is automated experiences, or experiences that are typically found online in websites or apps, but they could be found in a kiosk or in a print, video, web, or audio ad. Readers or viewers typically enjoy these experiences alone or on their own time. The second is automated conversations or self-guided conversations, which are great for people who are not quite ready to have a conversation with your company, even though they're looking for specific information. The third are in-person conversations, and they're deliciously messy, and that's why they're so effective. Conversations naturally allow space for people to express emotions and immediately respond to someone's thoughts and intentions. And the fourth are in-person experiences, which are the best way your company can build customer relationships. Customers need to have shared experiences with employees in your company. Now, these conversations are detailed in various course and training videos elsewhere on the site, but for the purpose of this analysis, we're only going to be indicating the type of content the conversation or interaction represents. And this identification will provide insight into the purpose of the conversation and the anticipated outcome and results. It's a good way to label chatbot scripts, call scripts, supporting materials like presentation decks, as well as websites and collateral. Those are conversation pieces, all of them, and their performance should be evaluated as well for brand compliance. What are you saying in your conversations? We can also score content and conversation topics. Now, your conversation topics should map to the problem your company solves, the customer jobs to be done, a company's brand promise, and its brand values. The topic of your conversations with various stakeholders matters much more than you think. There needs to be a flow of topics, almost like a mind map, guiding a prospect or customer through various ideas to better understand the thinking that a company has behind its solution. It helps a prospect, a customer, or even other stakeholders to understand why a company decided to create a product and how that company views its contribution to the world. It provides meaning and a larger vision or goal for someone in the company's community to be part of that is just bigger than themselves alone. This human need drives us to be more, to do more, and see how your product makes them part of something that they can't do alone. And this ranges from solving their immediate problem to solving larger world issues like disease, hunger, or even human trafficking. And this is why a topic that may be distantly related to your brand, company, or product could be confusing to your readers. If your company is making a statement or claim that's just unexpected, then it may be perceived as off-brand for your organization. A branded conversation and experience helps people understand what to expect from your organization, and when your company deviates from that, it can be quite confusing for your stakeholders. It's like when you interact with someone who gets a style makeover that doesn't quite suit his or her personality. The look may clash or just not feel harmonious, and that's what's happening here regarding conversation topics. There may be topics that conflict or just aren't harmonious with your company's brand. Now, determining the right topics for your brand is a pre-step to this part of the analysis, where you can consider how different types of conversation topics apply to the customer jobs to be done or the problem that your company solves, and how they relate to your company's brand values. Now, sure, there are topics that are more current and newsworthy, but there are also some topics that are strongly aligned with your brand and more closely mapped to your company. You could make a list of your company's values, the product values, and product benefits, and map topics to them, scoring each with a point. The topics with the most points are the most relevant to use. Now, let's consider how this could work with a real-world example. So let's say your company is developing an AI framework for the healthcare industry. Now, it's safe to say that your company should host discussions about AI and its impact on healthcare, physicians, surgeons, patients, administration, hospitals, physician practices, even health insurance. However, there may be a hot conversation that's happening about AIs and social media that may even be distantly related to healthcare. But that may be a conversation that your company avoids, not because it could be too controversial, but it simply is something that your company doesn't address. Customers and prospects could be confused by an AI healthcare company suddenly entering a conversation about social media. It most likely will score low on your content analysis of topics because it doesn't apply to what the product does or support the values of the company. It's in an area that the company just doesn't address. And by addressing topics that your company can't claim expertise in, you confuse stakeholders and muddle your brand. This is why it's smart to score your topics so you can explore new ideas and have a more objective way to determine if an area is okay for you to discuss. Now, there are a few considerations you may want to make during this part of the analysis. First, as we just discussed, make sure that the topics you support are aligned with the problem that your company solves. That's very important. Second, map these topics to your company's brand values to make sure that they complement them and build upon them. Third, determine which topics and conversations are currently most popular, the ones that you can leverage to build awareness versus the topics that will help build your product knowledge with your stakeholders. Which offline conversations build better relationships today? Try to have more of those and identify them and use them as much as possible. 4, don't be shy about including topics like company announcements. They are important too. Just be mindful of how you communicate them with your brand values. Now, 5, popular topics can be discovered through social media and hashtags, and feel free to use those to help build awareness of your organization. But please be mindful to communicate your ideas leveraging your brand values. Don't newsjack just for the traffic and attention. People will eventually see what your company is doing and stop following their clickbait. Make your conversation meaningful to attract real customers who want to solve a problem. How you have your conversation. Analyze if your content and conversations are on brand and how you talk about them, which includes considering the tone, the style, the word choice, and format, including the look and feel of the conversation. Now, to do this, you'll need to complete a similar exercise as you did for scoring reviews by determining how you talk about a brand using values. But there are some pre-activities you may want to consider before you get started. Now, one exercise outlined in the brand workbook helps you determine if commonly used company phrases are on brand or not. And you could include in your analysis if these phrases improve performance or hinder it. Start by identifying and reviewing commonly used words and phrases that your company uses in its communications and conversations. And then ask yourself a few questions. Do these words and phrases express your company's and brand values today? How do you use these phrases? Is there an observable trend when you're using these words in conversation that you see a lift or some sort of impact? Do you see a relationship between using these phrases and results of a better customer relationship or revenue? Do pieces that include them perform better, or do they perform worse? Based on all of this, could such an analysis provide insight into your larger brand analysis for your communication to further define your brand's communications effectiveness? Again, list the phrases and score them with a point to determine if they support the brand or the relationship. Now, another pre-analysis step could be that you compare the problem your product solves to the customer's job to be done and determine if the two elements are consistent. Now, there may be a gap. During this pre-analysis step, you could also consider how the customer feels today about having this problem. How do customers feel with this problem when they're using your product or service? And how does this experience map to your brand values? Now, you'll also want to determine what it means to be visually on brand. You should validate more than if a piece of content is using the right logo, colors, and fonts. Here are some additional characteristics of an organization's visual brand expression to consider. Clean and clear lines versus a more organic approach. A dominant use of white space or blank space versus a color. Color use, either as a main color or accent color. If you use images, illustrations, or both, a consistent photo or illustration style. There are a lot more considerations to add based on your brand's visual identity that a designer could provide, but this type of consideration can get you started. You can use the point scoring method described earlier to determine if pieces that use these design elements perform better or worse, or if the content seems to have a more impact on the results. Additionally, you may also want to do a preliminary analysis of how these values, phrases, and graphic elements translate into emotions. And this analysis can help you determine if your content provokes emotional expressions to get a deeper engagement with your audience. And one way to think about this is to ask some of these questions about each brand value. How do you communicate this value in your materials? How does this value relate to the problem you solve and the customer jobs to be done? What emotions do you expect or anticipate your customers will feel when they experience this expression? There may be multiple items to consider here. How do you want them to envision the experience of working with your company emotionally to support this value? Now, after consideration of some of these questions, you may want to get feedback from customers and stakeholders to determine exactly how they feel about your brand and its reputation, and how they would answer these questions. You could do surveys or focus groups to get this information, or you could make some generalizations yourself as a first pass. But remember, always follow up any work you do about customer assumptions with direct customer research that includes them to validate those thoughts. Such studies are invaluable. Understanding stakeholder perception of your brand may help you make adjustments if necessary to improve communication and build better customer relationships. Now, with all of this in mind, how could you approach a content analysis for a brand? Well, first, list the company values and product values and benefits as you did for accountability. Then list the brand elements to validate. This could include brand values, brand positioning, a brand promise, brand image, and brand personality. We could also leverage the pre-activity for commonly used company phrases that directly maps to brand depending on the level of detail you want to address in the analysis, and if you know that pieces with these phrases have improved performance. Now, score each piece of content to those elements. Each item that the content supports gets a point. This will give you an idea of how your content appears to stakeholders as being consistent or not. However, a key component is missing from the analysis so far: how the content is received today and if it achieves its goals. That's key to determine if the brand is effective or if something needs to change in the conversation to form a better customer relationship. Engagement can be defined as interactions with a customer through conversations that can include reading content, having conversations with employees, or experiencing a product or digital tools. It could include views, clicks, comments, likes, shares, some type of conversation around it. This includes live conversations like emails and phone calls as well. Loyalty is developed by customers having these conversations or engagement experiences over time. People are loyal when they come to you for answers to their problems. Metrics that support loyalty can include repeat visits, following on social media, sharing, return calls, repeat calls, basically anything that indicates repeat engagement. These are all indicators of a great company-customer relationship. And there will be a future video about loyalty and engagement and how to measure them beyond repeat sales or referrals, which are indeed loyalty indicators, but they are tied to revenue. And as we know, revenue is not the only indicator of business success. We often forget that increased engagement and loyalty to build that customer relationship will in the end also increase revenue. Now, for the content that you've gathered, map selected metrics for engagement and loyalty to each to get a better idea of their performance, because we're going to use this in the analysis. So how do you interpret all of this information? Well, first, try to make equivalent comparisons wherever possible. Compare content that has similar topics, life cycle steps, and content types. Review how closely this content follows brand practices, both for topics and look and feel. Compare all of those elements with content performance and its results. Determine which qualities are in the pieces that are getting the results you want. What about them is working? Why are they more successful than other pieces that just aren't working so well? See if you notice a pattern, and you probably will. So as an example, look at the results of individual pieces and how they're performing across a life cycle step to gain insights into the messages and designs that resonate best with your audiences. Consider the relationship between single pieces and the entire journey of a customer and how this one piece is part of a much larger conversation. Also consider if there is a relationship between pieces, a story, so you can see a path from start to finish. You may observe trends such as people skipping around steps or entering in the middle of a life cycle step, and this is okay. Understanding this may help you refine your journey and select more appropriate brand topics to better meet your customers where they are. You can also look at content using the perspective of type in a life cycle step. Which aspects of a phone script are more effective, or brochures, or a white paper? What are their topics? What is their branding like? Which do customers like and prefer more? So after you look at the pieces from the perspective of this larger and then smaller point of view, you can start to gain some insights. So here are some general observations and trends that come to mind right away. So let's say the content or conversations analyzed score low for branding, both for style and content topics, but high for engagement. So there may be one of two situations happening. Either you need to revisit your brand communications because what you're communicating as your brand and or what you're using as your analyzing criteria really isn't reflective of your organization's true brand. Or what you're doing as is already highly effective and you just need to more strongly communicate your brand to make it even more effective. But before making that final call, determine the brand values of what you're communicating. Is your content lightly branded? Or is it communicating the wrong brand and message? You may be communicating a brand for a totally different organization, which confuses your readers, viewers, or customers having a conversation with your company. This additional analysis may confirm the true situation and help you determine which direction is best to take. Now, if the branded content scores are high and engagement is low, but you're making okay revenue, you may not be communicating your brand properly to the right audience. Either you aren't speaking to the right target market and you need to revisit your communication plans and approaches, or you need to revisit your brand communications in general. Or actually, it could even be something else. In a case like this, something's missing because your customers aren't falling in love with your company and your brand. You need to take a step back and reevaluate what you're communicating, how you are communicating it, who you are talking to, and how you can build a better relationship with them. What is missing emotionally in your communications? Focus on that. Now, let's get more specific by analyzing and reviewing each life cycle step results, insights, and implications. For awareness content pieces, you could use number of views as an indicator of success. It's not very instructive because a view doesn't really mean that someone read it or took action, but it can indicate how many people access that piece of content, which is a type of engagement, technically. Now, time spent on a page is a much better indicator of engagement, but it's still not a reliable indicator of someone truly reading something. Page scroll is a much better indicator to determine if someone read an entire page or at least skimmed it. It's all about the interaction for the engagement. Alternatively, if you can determine if a reader or viewer engaging in a second conversation or a second piece of content, that would be a highly effective measurement of successful engagement. If you have a way to track the order in which people access content, that's even better to determine how people hear the story you have to tell and better understand which messages keep them coming back. This would allow you to investigate if the order of messages received makes a difference in engagement, in loyalty, or the structure and nature of a relationship. If there is a noticeable flow of readers going from one content piece to the next, or contacting the company consistently throughout a process for sales, rather than a funnel where fewer read fewer pieces and fewer connect with the company as time goes on in the sales process, then you're doing a great job of engaging a reader's awareness so that they can become an influencer in their communities. Now for purchase, you can use metrics like the number of leads, purchases, or conversations that occur to understand customer engagement or loyalty. You could also consider as a success metric the views for different pieces of content that lead up to this step. Many use such metrics today to indicate a successful brand, especially leads and purchases, because they directly map to revenue. Now, this brand content analysis offers an opportunity to consider different measurements of success that may be more closely related to relationship building, which include the number of customer conversations or engagements, and depending on the topic, more conversations, well, that would mean increased engagement and potentially increased loyalty. You could also consider using awareness metrics in this step as well, like which topics or content customers read and how often do they read it. Either way, the more engaged a customer is during this step, from a brand perspective, the content of the conversations would be supporting that brand. For a product, you could use a metric like repeat usage or product engagement. Another metric could be similar to what you find in awareness: how people continue to stay engaged with the brand and return to use the product or connect with it in the company digitally and through offline interactions. This information may help you develop a profile for the types of users who use your products so you can better target them during awareness and purchase. Refine your conversation topics and approaches so you can improve engagement with them. Now, for post-purchase, you can consider the types of conversations that you have with customers and if they continue the relationship. The number of customers who exit is a great indicator of a challenging company experience. The goal should be customer retention. That's a key metric for building great customer relationships. Alternatively, you could consider the number of touch points and interactions that each conversation contributes, and that is also a measure of engagement and loyalty. Do customers go to your company first to solve their problems, either online or through phone or email? Who do they reach out to when they need help? That's a great indicator as well. Some types of content that you shouldn't forget to include in this inventory and analysis include things like call scripts. Although there's a call to action or result to measure during each call for engagement or loyalty, you may want to determine if the language used in the original script is properly reflecting the brand. You may also want to get a sample of transcripts of recorded calls using this script to see how the script translates into real-life calls and if core brand elements continue to be captured. At times, a call center employee may sacrifice brand for effectiveness and improved customer service. And through content analysis, you could discover how you can better integrate the two without excluding the customer. In the end, creating a much better customer experience. Now, for each page of your website, the conversations on your website usually span across the entire customer relationship lifecycle and include a broad range of topics. But the challenge of a website is that each page tells a different story, introducing a different aspect of your brand's conversation. And that means that you need to score each page to determine if each one maps to your brand standard. A cumulative score averaged for the number of pages in the site will contribute to how the website communicates the brand overall, but each page really is a standalone element of that brand and needs to be measured as such. Sales presentations. Analyzing these materials will help build conversations between sales and marketing to keep the brand fresh and alive. Sales will often modify a template presentation to have a more effective conversation with a prospective customer. However, those insights often don't make it back to marketing. They are reused and shared within the sales organizations, and that's awesome. That is fantastic. But they need to make it back to marketing so that team can incorporate those messages into other materials that they're making to spark those same conversations and improve customer relationships and results. This brand content analysis can help you facilitate that. Brochures and white papers. Analyzing these for brand helps you understand how you're constructing your more formal conversations. Are there some values that you think you communicate well, although you might have received feedback that you could maybe do a little better? Well, this is going to provide you with a more objective review of your material to determine if you are as on brand in your materials as you think you are. Event presence. It's always a great time to analyze if your events are on brand. There are many elements to review and evaluate for an event experience. from booth design to booth worker attire to demo scripts to speeches and talks to giveaways to even the software experience itself. A logo on a shirt doesn't mean it's branded. And consistent attire among everyone working in a booth doesn't make your team look like they're part of your same company. Branding is about the spirit being communicated through conversations, attire, the environment, the software, the booth experience, the product. By evaluating the elements of an event booth, you can better understand what is working and what isn't to better communicate your brand. Social media posts. Like the pages of your website, each social media post is a standalone item and needs to be individually analyzed, as well as analyzed as being part of a collective for each social media platform. These smaller messages and conversations can have amazing impact on your stakeholders and can be measured by loyalty and engagement metrics through comments, shares, and conversations generated from a single post. Email communication. Analyze this as well to determine how your company is communicating to its audiences. We often devalue newsletters, but they are great ways to communicate with any audience. A welcome email is highly effective. The challenge with email is to make sure that the reader welcomes it. Sadly, some companies over-communicate with their customer through email, and they become a spam statistic or just someone simply unsubscribes. This brand analysis could help improve how you communicate using this medium. Why is SEO content hard to measure for brand consistency? SEO content is created for people to find you. If they aren't familiar with your brand, you may need to use words and terms that may not 100% correlate with your brand values because you need to use the words that your audience today uses to find you. They will search using their words, not yours. However, what you can discover from reviewing your SEO search terms is how people find you and what they think about your company and product before they meet you. You could compare that with your brand values to see if you need to change their perception about your product or if it's aligned. This type of analysis can provide insight into where customer conversations and communications may not be accurately communicating your brand. If you are able to have a more objective perspective of what your brand represents and how it works, it may help you better understand what you are saying and how you are saying it in your conversations to build these customer relationships. You may not be communicating your brand as well as you could, or you may be communicating a totally different brand that doesn't adequately complement the product or service your company sells. You may be creating a confusing experience for customers that will result in an inadequate customer relationship. This analysis will help you identify how you can improve your communications, their consistency, and their expressions, which will all result in a better customer relationship with increased engagement and loyalty, which will ultimately improve your revenue. If you'd like more information or help to do this in your own organization, let me know. I can help set this up for you so you can more objectively understand how you are communicating in your conversations to customers and prospects. I hope this was helpful. Thanks so much and have a great day.